Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a geopolitics news video, a bumper update, jam-packed full of information and stuff and things and bits and fluff and honey and cucumbers and all sorts of things, cabbages and kings. Just it's all there. It's all going to be here for you. I probably ill-advised to do this because one, I feel absolutely rotten. Two, I spent an entire day in the sunshine, watching one of my boys play a football tournament. Went out in the semi-finals. Highly controversial. The other team scored in the last minute after having done an obvious foul, so obvious that the team admitted it, and the ref didn't give it, and they went on from that foul that was just super obvious. Everyone going, and then one of them scored and won, and our team went out in the semi-finals. So I am on Monday. I've already written a letter to the English Football League. On Monday, I am challenging them in court. I'm just going after I get back from Scotland after streaking across Donald Trump's golf course. I'm not very good at walking, so I'll probably streak on a buggy. And then I'm going to pop back down and then go to High Court and take the English Football League down. I'm going to take them down to Chinatown because it's just absolutely outrageous. So they should have been in the final. It's just, life's not fair sometimes. Life is just not fair. And my throat is like razor blade, so I'm just going to take some, I don't know, drugs. Hopefully I can't feel my throat now. No, it's not really worked. Anyway, if I lose the plot halfway through this, please forgive me. I am somewhat unprepared due to having just sat outside for far too long for my pale skin. And yeah, basically my brain is frazzled, and that's before I start. And I have 8 gazillion tabs to go through with you, but I'm sure you will forgive me that. Thank you for being on board, whoever is on board. I didn't give you too much warning on this one since I just decided it sort of 10 minutes ago or whatever. Am I watching the next episode of South Park? So please watch my analysis of South Park that I did very late last night, well after midnight. I just thought it was a really good 23 odd minutes of incisive criticism of all sorts of things, including an awful lot of puerile humor that you're going to get from South Park. And if you have an issue with that, then you've got an issue with an awful lot of South Park episodes. Anyway, let's go and thank you, Karen, for listening to me as you just work around the house. Please continue your ironing. Cutting the grasses out. I may have to start ironing so I can watch. You don't need to watch. I will be playing a few videos, but it should be it should be understandable without having to see it. What else do we have? We have Mitch, another Canadian in the house. A really good amount of comment section engagement on that one. Yeah, and that's always good, isn't it? To get people talking and engaging with the content. Right. Let's go to where we're going to start. Now, I have this set, so I have to change every single tab individually for you to see it. In other words, look, I'm changing the tab now, but I have to do a special thing to make sure that you can see the tab I changed, because that's the only way I can get sound when I want it. So there will be many tabs that I forget to press a certain button so you can see it, and you'll be shouting in the sidelines while I just plow on without realizing you can't see what I'm talking about. Anyway, if that happens, just shout louder. It will happen. So we're going to start with the idea that, according to Donald Tusk, the Polish Prime Minister, that there will be war in the EU in 2027. So that's something we can look forward to. I just have to tell my son to close his door. Finn, I'm literally doing a live. Can you close your door, please? Now. So you could hear that. That was good, wasn't it? Hey, that's parenting from sitting in my office and having my boys gaming room. It's a garage that put some flooring in just over there, and that's how I do my parenting. Finn, I'm doing a live. Can you shut your door? Thank you very much. Anyway, so this is quite serious. This is the idea that the Europeans are very much admitting that there will be war possibly in Europe in short order, and there are many nations who could be on the brunt of could be at the brunt of what Russia is doing, which is waging an imperialistic war on anyone who happens to be around their borders. We're going to come on to this just after this in terms of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Russia actually announcing, as they often do, we need to listen to the Russians more. They do signpost what their intentions are, talking about the Baltics being next. But here, Donald Tusk, after speaking with NATO's Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, Alexis Grinkovich, this new American Major General, or whatever his rank is, that's in charge of NATO forces in Europe, he seems to be pretty sound. It's really good news that he is the one that's been chosen, because you think of what the White House ideology is at the moment. They could have put someone who was completely isolationist, or a Mike Flynn or something in charge there, and it would have been a disaster. So he said Poland must be ready. Poland must be well prepared. The Polish army must be well equipped. And actually, Poland are putting their money where their mouth is, because Poland has been spending above the US in terms of percentage GDP for some years now. They've really been gearing up, and they have a sizable armed forces. They have an awful lot of equipment, both just bought and on order. South Korea and the US being two of the main recipients of those orders. And yeah, Poland is definitely cognizant of the threat that Russia is. Now, this is what I was saying. This is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Russia, saying July the 21st marked 85 years since the establishment of the Latvian, Lithuanian, and Estonian SSR. Despite the significant advantage of large-scale Soviet investments and subsidies, these nations have been reduced to Europe's economic periphery today. So this is a bit of trash talking from Russia with regard to the Baltics, saying, hey, you're no longer in the Russian Empire. You're no longer in the Soviet Union. You guys suck. And you're just on the periphery of Europe's economic boundaries. Well, actually, before we get to the this is Zakharova herself, spokeswoman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, saying that Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, quote, lost their independence after the collapse of the USSR and now on the fringes of Europe. Let's look at the stats. The average salary in those countries is 1,700 to 2,200 euros. And in Russia, it's around $600. So Zakharova is simply laughable. Check out the post below. Well, this is what we're actually going to come on to, which is this. Marco Mikkelsen here saying the change in real wages in European countries between 1994 and 2024 in percentage terms. Note the developments in the Baltic states: Estonia 236%, Latvia 245%, and Lithuania 290%. These bad boys have been absolutely kicking butt in terms of, from 1994 to 2024, having some serious positive change in real wages. And in fact, you can look at all of Eastern Europe. The darker the blue, the more positive that move has been. I find it quite interesting that the UK has done pretty well there. So that's interesting. But Eastern Europe has really, really benefited from leaving the sphere of influence of the Russian Federation, of the old Soviet Union, and Poland buying all of this kit for their armed forces and having one of the best performing economies in the EU over recent times has been a real beneficiary of the EU, as have all of these eastern states, and that adds to the kind of surprise when you hear what Viktor Orban is saying. And in fact, he's come out today and said that he's going to block the next EU budget if they don't unfreeze some of their frozen funding for Hungary. I think Hungary is going to be on the receiving end, possibly, of some very angry MEPs and some Article 7 and whatnot activity. I think I wonder whether the EU has reached the end of its tether with Hungary. I mean, it's been a long time coming, but yeah. So anyway, it's funny when the Russians say these strong pieces of rhetoric, but actually they've got no justification for saying that. There's no evidence to back up their claims. Okay, here we have Reuters saying the Russian oil revenue has dropped 37% in July versus 2024, the year-on-year drop of 37%. I mean, that is huge. Russia's oil and gas revenue fell 37% to 680 billion rubles in July amid sustained defense spending for its Ukraine military operation. We have EU sanctions, according to Grilo Shevchenko. EU oil sanctions are working. India's Reliance, a top private refiner processing 600,000 barrels a day, is cutting Russian oil, which made up nearly 50% of its 2025 imports. It's turning to Abu Dhabi's Murban crude oil instead. Meanwhile, BP and PetroChina tankers are now avoiding Nayara refinery, 49% owned by Rosneft. Around 250,000 barrels per day of diesel and jet fuel exports are at risk. This is good news. This is why you want these sanctions to be continued. You want them to be increased, improved, loopholes to be closed, and you need unity among non-obviously Russian nations. You need unity, particularly between the EU, other G7 nations, and majorly the US. The US, I think, are behind the curve a little bit when it comes to sanctions at the moment due to inactivity for the last 6 months in that domain. Here we have the first tanker refused to deliver Urals crude, so Russian crude, to Rosneft's Indian refinery, which fell under European sanctions. That's Reuters. European sanctions against Rosneft's largest refinery in India initially deprived it of customers. Tankers began to refuse to take its oil products, but now sellers of raw materials have also started to turn away from Nayara Energy, which owns the refinery in which Rosneft has a 49.13% stake. Nayara has not received a batch of Urals crude for the first time since sanctions were announced. The Omni tanker carrying about 700,000 barrels of Russian oil arrived in Nayara's Vadinar port in Gujarat on July the 18th, the very day the EU introduced the 18th package of restrictive measures. And then we have Ukrainska Pravda saying Japanese vessels have been removed from EU sanctions. So some Japanese vessels were sanctioned by the EU for carrying Russian oil after pledging not to transport Russian gas. So that's good news that these sanctions are having an effect. And in this case, Japanese tankers are now refusing to take Russian gas because of the sanctions. Just on power in general, and we're going to return to the idea of renewables later because Donald Trump has been saying some pretty mental things again. EU power is becoming less and less reliant on fossil fuels. This is important to understand because there's a connection between energy mixes and energy strategy in the EU and paying Russia money, right? And if you pay Russia lots of money, then they get to afford to go to war with Ukraine, and they can keep prosecuting the war. So EU countries are becoming less reliant on fossil fuels, and the largest fall in fossil fuel share comes from Denmark, going from 76%. This is 2004 to 2024. Sorry. As Denmark has gone from 76% to 12%, Portugal 73% to 15%, Netherlands 91% to 46%, Ireland 95 to 55, Greece 90 to 50, and Finland 44 to 5%. This is really, really important for not just the environment, not just for sustainability and looking to the future, but I think energy security and not paying Russia money. Don't want to pay Russia money. The EU is considering proposals to speed Russian gas phase out by 1 year, according to Reuters. These EU member states will not likely agree to push the ban up a year, but officials could use the demand as leverage in the upcoming negotiations. I think this is coming from predominantly Green MEPs and other affiliated MEPs within the European Parliament who are wanting that phase out to be quicker from an environmental point of view. But of course, that really helps in terms of not giving money to Russia. Again, that point. Right. What do we have here? So a former security guard at the US Embassy in Oslo, that's Norway, has been charged, just in case you don't know your geography, has been charged with espionage, accused of leaking sensitive info to Russian and Iranian handlers. He was allegedly paid in Bitcoin and euros. Bitcoin is a problem for nefarious transactions, particularly concerning Russia. And entities, individuals who want to get around laws, basically. So the suspect denies all the charges. Worth noting today that, what was I going to say? Oh yes, Slovaks in a I haven't got the tab here, but I should have it. Slovaks in a recent poll, 14% of Slovaks have said that they wouldn't mind joining Russia and being part of Russia, and then another percentage on top of that have said they're kind of like unsure or whatever. I mean, a surprising amount of people think Russia is a decent place to be a part of. It's just pretty staggering, given what we know about Russia. And yeah, you might be all right if you're a Moscow or St. Petersburg elite, but outside of that, things don't look too cool. Okay. We are then going to go to Elliot Higgins here. Well, actually talking about Euronews piece here, saying Russian propaganda swamps Moldova ahead of elections. They are having to put up with an awful lot of Russian interference at the moment. And we're going to talk about Russian interference. That's a kind of segue into our next points. We're going to start with AfD in Germany. So AfD in Germany, obviously doing pretty well in the polls, been growing and growing and growing, but they are evidently very, very anti-Ukraine, pro-Russia. And there is no greater example of this than with with this German chap, a young chap who fought this year for Ukraine in a volunteer force, who's actually part of the AfD. He's actually a municipal politician. His name is Tim Schramm, and the AfD wants to kick him out of the party because he fought for Ukraine. As Pekka Kalinemi says, and these people claim they're not pro-Kremlin. They are. But interesting that obviously then not everyone is, because here is someone who fought for Ukraine, but also feels strongly about being in the AfD. Now it looks like this is him here. As I've said in many interviews, in my opinion, this is a private campaign by certain individuals for whom Russia or the opinions of their Russian friends are more important than Europe's security or even Germany itself. But I will also do within the AfD what my Ukrainian comrades do every day, not to give up. So that's actually the guy himself commenting back to Pekka Kalinemi there. So interesting. And what you would want is people like Schramm here trying to change the AfD from within, trying to flush out Russian influence there. But it is worrying that they are so overtly pro-Russian when they are gathering so much power within Germany, particularly in the east, and hence that is something to do with the sympathy for Russia. The fact that many in the east, I mean, it's weird, isn't it, that you remember, or you should have, if not living memory of the Stasi, you should have cultural memory of the Stasi and what it was like to be living under Soviet occupation, effectively. And yet, memory's a funny thing, isn't it? Rose-tinted glasses. I think of it in terms of Trump 1.0. People forgot how chaotic Trump 1.0 was. We just have shit memories, and we forget things. And then you go through it again, Trump 2.0, and you go, oh yeah, it's mental. It's absolutely mental. It's chaotic. There's chaos every day. It's insane. And that's pretty much like it was in Trump 1.0. So really should have remembered that. But we're not very good at remembering things. Now, the great Carol Cadwalladr, who has been campaigning against Russian disinformation, had all sorts of influence in British and European politics, says that there's been a landmark decision on the UK's failure to investigate Russian interference to be handed down. I think that has been handed down, and I think it was a bit of a mixed bag. A 5-year legal battle in the UK and European courts comes to a head. Will we finally learn the truth about the Kremlin and the Brexit vote? This is a really big deal. Who knows what will happen? But this is a really solid case brought by a group of incredible MPs and human rights lawyers. And all they want is for the UK to try and find out the truth. But I'm not sure. So that would have happened by now. I did this a few days back. I need to look at what has happened there, because so what happened is we had interference in the Brexit election, right, by the Russians, rather similar to the 2016 election in the US. And the Trump administration in the US in 2016 wanted to sort of cover that up, and now they're kind of relitigating it and trying to make it look like an Obama treasonous thing. But actually, it was very much well understood by multiple departments and entities in the United States that Russia interfered. Now, we're not talking about collusion. That's a separate question. And yeah, interference is obvious. Like the social media companies had admitted interference from Russia. And it's the same with Brexit. But in Britain, we didn't do a report. We didn't release a report because one would presume, I think a report did get done, but they didn't release it because the Conservatives were in charge at the time and right up till 2024. And any admission of interference in the Brexit elections or referendum would have then cast doubt on the validity of the results. And that would be really uncomfortable. So they didn't really release any reports. And I think that's what she wanted. So here, I mean, well, I would probably have to go and find out what the outcome here was. I have a feeling it was a mixed bag of nuts, and actually, there were some good things that came out of this announcement, and a few things that means that they aren't going to be big changes forthcoming and whatnot. But I'll get back to you on that one. We're going to now go to Hungary. Hungarian prosecutors have charged a citizen from Mako who voluntarily joined Ukraine's armed forces in 2024 and fought against Russian troops. He now faces prison time for his service, as Hungary threatens legal action against nationals who enlist in foreign militaries. And of course, that'll be some kind of generic law, but one that would be intended, I'm sure, to harm those who want to not only sympathize with Ukraine, but do something about it. So that's happening in Hungary. Now, the Megabari Act, which is a bipartisan act to support democracy in Georgia, it mandates sanctions on Putin's pawns and supports Georgia's Euro-Atlantic future, is being stalled by senators. So I think it got through the House of Representatives, but then we have Mark Wayne Mullin, Mike Lee, who is just a horrific, in my opinion, senator from Utah, and Rand Paul, who's a libertarian that, yeah, don't like any of those three. They're all, yeah, bad apples. As Alex Froglu, who's a good reporter, actually says, my only question is why this vital bill passed the House and the SFRC. So that's the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So it passed at committee level, and you just got wingnut idiots who want to put a stall on anything that sounds like decent foreign policy as far as the United States is concerned. Does my nut in. Tataragami says Russia continues to push into Africa. So we're following this kind of foreign interference. Georgia, it's obviously the Russians interfering with the Georgia Dream Party there. I've talked to, as you know, I've interviewed a Nigerian journalist who was talking about, in fact, I think I've got a post from Philip Abaji Jr. next. He talks about the huge influence of Russia in the Sahel region of Africa. Tetragami here says Russia continues to push into Africa, not just militarily, but economically, but through the church as well. The Moscow Patriarchate's growing presence in the Central African Republic appears to be part of a broader strategy of influence and intelligence gathering. So interesting how the church has been used in Ukraine as a form of power, as a way to spread Russian influence and a way to spy as well. KGB is very heavily involved in the Russian. In fact, the Patriarch Kirill is a former KGB agent. They've used that in Ukraine, and the pushback against the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine has been seen by some Russian sympathizers, say in the United States, as Ukraine being anti-church. They're not being anti-church; they're being anti-Russian Orthodox Church, which is pretty nefarious. Well, actually, that same church is doing similar strategies in Africa. As a reminder, 2023 reports by Swiss outlets Le Matin Dimanche and Sonntagszeitung, citing Swiss federal archives, revealed that the head of Moscow Patriarch Kirill lived in Geneva in 1970 and was a KGB agent under the codename Mikhailov, which is what I'm saying. You know, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church is a former KGB agent. Sergei Voyemava from the Central African Republic is the first local Orthodox Christian to be ordained and now serves as rector of the Church of St. Andrew in Bangui, the capital. The church under the Moscow Patriarchate was established with the support from Moscow. Since 2022, the Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate has been expanding in the Central African Republic, reaching around 700 members by 2025, mostly local converts. However, many remain reluctant to join, viewing it as a tool of Russian colonization. Yeah, a real worry there. And Philip Abaji Jr. adds a leaked document revealed that Russia is demanding $15 million monthly, which is around 40% of the Central African Republic's projected 2025 national budget. Wow, that's a very different sized budget to the United States or the UK. For security services from Africa Corps, it's fascinating that Russia can make such a request and still claim to be Africa's best friend. Just extorting from Africa for services is a protection racket. That's what it is, a protection racket. Right, the Myanmar. I need to probably explain this a little bit more. So there's a junta in Myanmar, a military government that is sanctioned, it's a pariah state basically at the moment. And the previous American administration obviously understood them as that. The present Trump administration sent them a letter about tariffs, and I guess it was just, I think, ineptitude, probably incompetence, where they just almost sent out an almost generic letter to, let's send out a tariff letter to Myanmar and get them doing tariffs with us and blah blah blah. But what this actually did was put the military junta back on the map, geopolitically speaking, as far as they're like, their leader came out and said, "Oh, we're really happy we received a letter from America. This is great. Thank you for talking to us." And it's given them a sense of validation, which is just insane. As Chris Owicki says, the Myanmar junta is one of the worst and cruelest governments in the world, deeply involved in drugs and organized crime, and forcibly conscripting child soldiers. At least this policy change gives us a benchmark for what Trump is okay with. So on the back of then sending this letter about tariffs to Myanmar, then they've started lifting sanctions. So it doesn't look so much like incompetence anymore. It's just outright insidious condoning of dictators and authoritarian regimes. So the US has lifted sanctions on the Myanmar junta allies after General praises Trump. So what happened is they sent this letter to Myanmar, which I think probably was incompetence. Then the military general said, "This is amazing. Thanks for talking to us. Oh, isn't Trump amazing? I love Trump. Trump's great." And then Trump goes, "Oh, that's nice. Oh, they've got sanctions on them. Let's lift sanctions because he said some really nice things to me." That's how I'd read this. It's like foreign policy by narcissism. It's just utterly insane. But there you go. That's 2025 for you. Now, talking about influence, Russian influence, and let's remind ourselves of the Tenant Media entity that was set up by what's her name, Chen from Canada. A couple of Canadians sort of using this entity, Tenant Media, as a way of funneling Russian money into and influence into American media and to the end consumer. And that involved paying huge amounts of money to people like Benny Johnson and Tim Pool. And then they produced content that was overtly pro-Russian. This was then found out. FBI were all over it. And then there's a change of government. But really, people like Benny Johnson should be ejected to the slag heap of deleterious influences on the US. But of course, these people, the opposite happens. They are championed. Tim Pool gets a seat in the freaking White House press corps. Benny Johnson is all over the shop at the moment. So they take money from Russia, and that's exactly what the Trump administration want now. Benny Johnson is now one of the most successful influencers in the scare quotes media landscape. Russian asset Benny Johnson, says Pekka Kalyanemi, is by far the fastest growing social media influencer. BuzzFeed Benny is notorious for plagiarizing and constantly spreading lies online. He was paid $400,000 per month by the Kremlin to spread anti-Ukraine narratives. He's done a whole Vatnik soup on him back in May that I probably should go through. Benny Johnson, look at this. The political and political adjacent YouTube channels by Net's new subscribers Q2. Benny Johnson, 2.2 million users. Fox News, 600,000. MSNBC plus 490,000, Midas Touch 480,000, Charlie Kirk 470,000, Joe Rogan 400,000, Tim Pool plus 390,000, Turning Point USA, Tucker Carlson. I mean, look, the red are right leaning, very right leaning in all of these cases. Asmund Gold, Sean Ryan. Sean Ryan's sort of right adjacent because it's not overtly political, but it really is. If you go on I've been on the chat threads of Sean Ryan when he interviewed Gavin Newsom to try and reach across the aisle, and actually had a 4-hour conversation with Gavin Newsom, the Democrat governor of California, and he was excoriated by people, his followers, for platforming Gavin Newsom. Fascinating. Anyway, so it shows you how popular the right wing is, and how much appetite there is for this kind of rhetoric, and it kind of does make me sad. So anyway, I'm going to return to Benny Johnson in a second, because this guy, super influential, they are being used. I would submit to you that people like Benny Johnson and Tim Pool are probably receiving money, and this is massive speculation, and allegedly, and blah blah blah, and pinch of salts, because I don't want to be taken to court. But I could imagine a scenario whereby these people might be receiving money from either directly from the US administration somehow, or indirectly from super PACs or from political entities, for doing the amplification work of they basically are, I think, semi-formally the propaganda arm of the Trump administration, is kind of what I'm saying. And I'm sure there's money swapping hands. And the reason why I think this is the case is because some of the things they say are insanely twisting of reality. And we're going to look at that right now. So I'm going to set this up by saying Trump is in Scotland at the moment playing golf on the taxpayers' dime, right? And we in the UK are having to pay lots of security in terms of loads of police presence, because he's come over. And so this is costing taxpayers in both countries a lot of money. And actually, it's not even a formal state visit. I did my YouTube short on this earlier today while I was at my boys' football tournament. And I was saying this is absolutely outrageous. If this happened in any other country, you'd be going batshit crazy about this. Like, he's essentially, he is meeting Ursula von der Leyen and Keir Starmer and some official people, but essentially he's actually there to do to open a new golf course, I think, and to schmooze with people that lines his own pocket. Like, this is as much a private I don't know what you call it, visit. It's as much a private visit as it is a public one. and that the American taxpayer would be paying for him to go to the UK, to Scotland, to increase his own net worth and to make more money, I find really egregious. And we are also footing something of the bill for that as well, for Trump making money. Anyway, it was fascinating. I was listening to the radio, LBC News, this morning on the way to the tournament, and they had an American on there saying, I don't know whether this is a private, like, no one knows whether this is a private visit or a state visit. Like, it's not, it's like, it's so confusing what's going on there. And it blurs the boundary between private and state. So you got this guy as the president just grifting on the back of being president. We've seen this with meme coins and crypto and all sorts. And that's what he's doing, playing golf, just having a full day today playing golf on the taxpayer's dime. It's just insane. Anyway, Scotland isn't a massive fan of Trump, right? Here is the front page of the national newspaper with Trump's eyes at the top, just in case you're listening, and massive letters on the front, all over the front page saying, convicted US felon to arrive in Scotland. So it's not talking about this man being the president of the United States. It is calling him a convicted US felon to arrive in the United States. Sorry, in Scotland. And the tagline underneath, Republican leader, so it doesn't even call him the president of the United States. It says Republican leader who was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation will visit golf courses. That is the single greatest front page of a newspaper I think I've ever seen. I freaking love it, Scotland. I love it, the national newspaper. You have absolutely nailed that. Nailed it. As someone says in the live feed, never met a Scot that liked Trump. That's who's popping there. Yeah, he's not popular up there. And that's what I'm going to talk to you now about concerning these influencers and whether they're taking money directly, because the stuff they're saying is outright propaganda. And we can see that from this BBC. This is a BBC news piece, and I'm going to play it for you. It's just a few seconds of a couple of people standing on the side of the road in Scotland as the motorcade passes. And these people are taking pictures. Like, I would probably do similarly. Like, I would be shouting like "Nobber" or something like that, but I'd be taking video of it because, hey, this is, I've never seen the US president before, and he's driving past where I live. So there's a few
as well as meeting world leaders. And here it comes, the presidential motorcade.
Just shows how many people are traveling with him, Regina, doesn't it? Shows how many people are traveling with him, the sheer number.
Just listen to the reporter who said crowds cheering for him, right? You've got one person on the left who has a sign slagging him off, calling him paedophile. You've got a bunch of people standing opposite doing likewise, right? Where are the crowds cheering Trump on? This is not true. So before we go to the influencers, I'm going to call out the BBC correspondent here, who is actually trying to cover up the fact that Scotland doesn't want this man to be here.
Just shows how many people are traveling with him, Regina, doesn't it?
She said, I think we can hear some of the crowds cheering, right? 90% of who we can see are policemen. 10% are not crowds. There are a few people standing on the side of the road, and most of them have placards slagging him off. That is not the correct way to interpret what you are seeing.
Shows how many people are traveling with him, the sheer number of vehicles that are arriving.
It does indeed. I was just wondering if we could actually listen in to hear any of the cheers. It looks like most of the people lining the streets are waving. I'm quite pleased that he's here, but of course, some protesters as well.
She says, of course, there are protesters as well. Most people I can see here are protesters.
And yeah, we did have a list of some of the officials that he was on the plane with, Martin, as you mentioned there. Press secretary.
Where are the crowds? There's literally not crowds, right? So, I'm going to pick a bone with the BBC for really badly reporting on that. But then we have Eric Doherty. So Eric Doherty is one of these right-wing influencers. Okay, he's got 500,000 followers on Twitter, and he is assistant news director for FL Voice News in Florida. And he is one of these big, pretty similar in rhetoric to Benny Johnson and Tim Pool, etc., etc. Justin, Scottish people are, quote, and this is what he says. Justin, all caps, Justin, Scottish people are, all caps, flooding every roadway in support of President Trump's motorcade. The entire route was excited Scots, all holding up their phones. Just like in America, the man's a celebrity. Like, you could only say that if you are absolute outright propaganda. You could only say that if you're paid to say that. In some way that you are paid to say that. That is absolutely distorting reality. 100% there. Unless I'm misreading Eric Doherty and this is tongue-in-cheek, complete sarcasm. But I'm pretty sure that's not him. Here he says, and I'm going to play you again the 40 seconds of this video, but let's this time round read what he says first. Just now, Scottish people are, all caps, ecstatic, waiting for and watching President Trump's motorcade drive by. Just look at them. The look on their faces is pure joy. Europe is filled with people who love 47, respected again. Like, and as people blur saying, all 7 of them, this is some desperate propaganda right there, and you know it. So people slag him off for this, but this, what you are seeing from these people who are these huge influencers now. I know Eric Doherty's not here, but go back to this. Your kind of Tim Pools and your Benny Johnson. We're going to come back to Benny Johnson. They are getting paid, no doubt, I think, to say stuff like this because there's not a snowball's chance in hell that the Scottish people are ecstatic waiting for and watching President Trump's motorcade drive by. There's not a snowball's chance in hell that you can just look at them, the look on their faces is pure joy. And there's not a snowball chance in hell that Europe is filled with people who love 47 and that he's respected again. I don't know a single person in the UK now, and that includes all my reform-loving family members, who likes Trump. I know a lot of people who love reform who don't like Trump. Now, I know there are some people in the UK who do like Trump, but generally, there is not a lot of goodwill for Donald Trump here, and even more so in Scotland. I know what the Scottish are like, right? And I've seen a lot of the placards, and they are hilarious. But then there's no love for him. So now let's see if Eric Doherty is interpreting this BBC snippet correctly.
25% tariffs. So it's not looking too bad for the UK. And I think Trump and Starmer will want in their meeting to project a view of a good relationship and quite a lot of positive things happening and quite a lot to look forward to in the future. Now, under the surface, we'll see what happens on Gaza, we'll see what happens on Ukraine. There's a lot of international problems and crises around, and there are still potentially problems in trade, especially if President Trump...
Right, okay. I freaking love this. So, look at their faces, pure joy. They are ecstatic. Europe is filled. Just look at them. Respected again. Scottish people are ecstatic watching him drive by. That is someone, I think, having a bit of a laugh, going, oh my God, the president's here. They're not like, this is probably someone that couldn't give a monkey's ass about Donald Trump in general, but lives in a house next to this road and is out there. I don't think any of these people are ecstatic for Donald Trump. They might be ecstatic that they are seeing the US president come through their tiny little village. But this isn't Scotland or Europe being filled with people that are in any way hugely welcoming Donald Trump here.
Comes up
this
with
is like
many more ideas for
6,
tariffs.
literally, there's what, 8 people there?
Will be
9 people?
Look as positive as possible.
Okay, all right. Lord Kim Darg, former British ambassador to the United States. Thank you so much for joining us with those. And
look at that. Well, whoop-de-whoop-de-doo. There's more people in Suitors Inn there than outside it, no doubt. People are more interested in downing their sorrows in a pint of Tennent's Super rather than watching Trump motorcade through their village. This is absolute propaganda. Scottish people are ecstatic. Well, it's just not what you're seeing from that. Then we come on to Benny Johnson. So a guy that's now all over the socials. And here you do have a crowd. But again, I'm betting that most of this crowd will be just, oh, look what's happening in our neck of the woods. A president's coming to our village or whatever. Watch, says Benny Johnson, a massive crowd has turned out in Scotland to welcome President Trump. It's undeniable. He is truly respected and supported across the world. Absolutely incredible. That is bona fide 100% propaganda. That you do not say that unless you're being paid to say that. That is my bet. If you actually think that from looking at this crowd, then you are stupid. You are thick, and you have no idea what you're talking about. If you genuinely believe that these scenes are representative of those ideas, then I'm sorry, you don't know what you're talking about. Here we have a bunch of people wanting to put stuff on their Facebook feeds as Trump and his motorcade pass by their Scottish villages and towns. Of course, reported by Rapid Response 47, which is another pro-Trump thing. I mean, this is all like propaganda, but like this is what as Sean Pinder says, massive laughing emoji, claiming Trump is respected around the world when he's objectively the least respected US president. Do some research. Actually, genuinely, the data is there. He's literally the least respected president. Is just next level cope. I'll never understand this kind of delusion. The massive crowd is oppressed, Benny. The people in Scotland hate him. So it just like it kind of depresses me that up is down, down is up. Just like I said the other day when I did that video on Newsmax saying maybe it just might be that Ghislaine Maxwell is a victim here. This is what happens when you live in a distorted reality. Up becomes down, left becomes right. And you can just blithely assert the exact opposite to what is going on. So as Ron Smith here says, happening now, Trump and his friends are playing golf in Scotland on taxpayers' dime. At the same time, Americans are grappling with high prices. This isn't a state tour. This is him, I think, just going and opening a new golf course and doing private business on the back of being the president. And I think it is despicable. I would be dead against that if I was an American taxpayer. Right, I'm now going to go to Trump himself. I think this was arriving in Scotland, doing what? Do you know what my partner said yesterday? We were in a car, and she'd just been listening to Trump on the radio, and she said, "I can't believe blah, blah, blah." And I said, "I bet you just listened to an interview with him standing under a jet engine." She's like, "Yeah, oh my god, I can't believe," and she had a rant about why they would do an interview under the jet engine. I said, Helen, I've been reporting on this for some time, but in Trump 1.0, he started doing this. I don't know what the reason is for it, but it is definitely purposeful. And she's like, yeah, 100%. Like he can't get enough of getting interviewed under either helicopter engine or a jet engine. So it's really loud and you can't really hear what he's saying and you can't really hear the question. There must be something going on there. So if you guys can let me know in the live thread why he would want to be interviewed so often next to a massive noisy jet engine. Anyway, this is Trump again talking about windmills.
Well, I'd say two things to Europe. Stop the windmills. You're ruining your countries. I really mean it. It's so sad. You fly over and you see these windmills all over the place, ruining your beautiful fields and valleys and killing your birds. And if they're stuck in the ocean, ruining your oceans.
Should we have a game of how much stuff does coal and oil kill? Should we have a game of let's look at oil slicks and Nigeria pumping out oil and Venezuela with oil floods there in where they're drilling? Should we have a game of that? Should we have a game of what kills more wildlife? Shall we? Shall we, Trump? Anyway, so he comes to Scotland, and the one thing he wants to have a go at Europe for is windmills, because they are the bane of Europe at the moment. Those damn windmills and solar farms. And then you get this happening on TV in kind of response to that.
Your oceans. Stop the windmills.
Is he right? He's 100% right. Look, they just so people understand, wind and solar only work when there's wind and sun. We don't have technology to store the energy from wind and solar. So if you make yourself reliant on wind.
Right. I would, and I'm not a violent person. Right. I'm not a violent person. I used to play rugby to try and get that violence out that was in there occasionally in a legal and sporting manner. And then we'd shake hands and go and have a pint afterwards. I'm not a violent man. I would like to run across the pond right now and punch that man on the right fully in the face. What an idiot. But again, like, is this propaganda? Is this lying? Do you like, does this person really know that what he's saying is bonkers? I've got solar panels on my roof, and do you know what happens? It charges up a battery, a massive battery that's in my garage right behind my boy playing on a PlayStation. It keeps him warm in the heat of the summer. I've got a big battery in there, and what it does is it charges up my battery, and then I can use my battery when the sun goes down. You see how it works? You see how that works, mate? You see how that works? You prime plonker.
Work when there's wind and sun. We don't have technology to store the energy from wind and solar. So if you make yourself reliant on wind and solar, then if there's no sun and no wind, you get no energy. It's insane to be making your countries dependent on this. At first, they went from being dependent on Russia for natural gas. Now they're depending on wind and solar. Maybe they ought to do what he's doing and start, producing nuclear energy and drill, baby, drill. That would be smart.
I just think we're all coming around that way, and hopefully the West will follow. They have no choice.
None of you know what you're talking about. This is the like stupid city. Like, it's like energy mixes. You're not 100% reliant on wind and solar. No one's saying that. No one, like, this is a straw man of reality. You absolute dimwits. As Fred Wellman said, batteries. We have effing batteries. Are these people idiots? Just, oh my God, these people are idiots. Anyway, just to give you a bit more context here, this is Robert Reich saying, last year, the FTC banned 2 big oil executives from serving on the boards of oil giants Exxon and Chevron after it found they colluded to fix gas prices. Trump's FTC just overturned that ban. His regime is rubber stamping corporate corruption. Who for? Fossil fuels industry. Oh, I wonder why he's just come on and slagged off wind and solar. I wonder why Trump is standing there slagging off wind and solar. Oh, he seems to have been changing the rules and overturning rules that don't stop fossil fuel corruption. Okay, I understand it. Follow the money. Follow the money. Just anyway, there. So Trump's in the UK, in Scotland. British and US sources say the key issues on the agenda for Trump's visit to Scotland to meet with Starmer and Ursula von der Leyen when he meets with them is to include ending Russia's war in Ukraine. So that seems to be at the top of the agenda, and that's excellent. That's what we want to hear. The US told China at the United Nations on Friday it should, quote, stop fueling Russia's aggression in Ukraine. China fought back on that, and there's a bit of a contretemps between China and the US with regard to China being supportive of Russia. So that's a great segue on to this. So this is a piece in the that looks like New York Times. I've got this on the archive and I've forgotten where I've archived it from. It's Washington Post. It was going to be one or the other. Hang on, give me a second. More illicit drugs. So, fascinating piece in the Washington Post here. China's strategy, let Trump cook. As President Donald Trump dismantles US soft power and launches trade wars with allies, China is content to sit back and watch. So, I'm going to just skip to in the middle of this article. Proponents of America First say they see their reforms as rescuing the country from liberal torpor. They don't necessarily wish for an end to US primacy on the world stage, but they find in Beijing a confident Chinese leadership that won't blink amid the weekly havoc unleashed by the White House. Trump has engaged in rounds of tariff threats with China, but has settled for periodic diplomatic truces, including the one that followed high-level talks last month in London. On Tuesday, he confirmed that he's considering journeying soon to Beijing for talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Trump's erratic approach has also played into China's hands. Quote, the disruption to bilateral trade triggered by Trump's tariffs has left the US manufacturers scrambling and overpaying for materials. More on that later. wrote Zhongyuan Zoe Liu, a senior fellow for China Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Quote, in implementing rare earth export controls in early April, the Chinese government has discovered a powerful tool for inflicting pain on American businesses. China, she added, may not want a trade war with the United States, but, quote, it would rather decouple than kowtow to Trump. Ali Wine, an expert on U.S. China relations in the International Crisis Group, said China is broadly pursuing three main lines of strategy in the face of Trump's threats. It's working to boost trade with other countries and parts of the world in a bid to insulate itself from the effects of U.S. protectionist measures. So, in other words, if the U.S. is going to have a trade war with China, China needs to do the trade it does with America, needs to substitute that with trade elsewhere so that it can mitigate against the trade war with the U.S. It's arguing in diplomatic channels and public propaganda that America first is not an aberration, but a feature of US politics that will have negative consequences for American allies. And is finding, quote, more momentum, more traction, as Wynne put it to me, for the emergence of a 21st century international order that's organized more around principles that suit Beijing and its political worldview. Okay, so various initiatives promulgated by Xi on development, security, and cultural harmony have put forward a rosy Chinese vision of global cooperation and prosperity stripped of liberal ideals around universal rights and democracy. China's position is gaining ground thanks to the shifts in Washington. Beijing's assessment right now is that the United States is dismantling fairly systematically the sources of its strength. Julian Gewirtz, a China scholar and former Biden administration official, said in a recent interview, quote, the United States, in their view, is dismantling its alliance relationships and alienating much of the world, Gewirtz told The Wire, China. It's dismantling aspects of the US science and technology ecosystem, cutting funding to some of our great universities and making it very unappealing, if not outright impossible, for foreign talent to come to do research in those universities. And it's eliminating arms of US influence around the world, from USAID to Voice of America. China's view is that the United States is, in a sense, unilaterally disarming. Okay, end quote. This is so on point. The United States, like I keep telling you, is handing the keys of power to China, and China know it. And the point of this article is that the Chinese know it so much that they're basically sitting back and eating popcorn. They are watching the United States unilaterally disarm, and they don't have to do anything to help this. America first appears to be completely isolationist. And while on the one hand, you still have many people going, USA, 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 seeing, feeling that the US should be at the top of the global hegemonic ladder, that the US is the most powerful nation in the world and should remain so, but at the same time, doing everything it can to not remain powerful around the world. They are defunding soft power initiatives. They are defunding US propaganda arms, which is essentially what Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Liberty, Radio Free Asia are. Defunding all of that, handing the keys of power to China, and China says, thank you very much. You keep going. Now, to continue, the blow to US soft power and the damage to US credibility among allies and other partners might be irreversible. Quote, I'm not sure if any other incumbent power in history has so rapidly and systematically attacked its own principal sources of competitive advantage, Wynne told me. If Trump's current hostility to alliances continues and the administration keeps insulting, belittling, and even economically harming its long-standing partners, the United States is going to find the world an increasingly unfriendly place, wrote Margaret Macmillan, a historian and professor emeritus at Oxford University. So now go back to J.D. Vance coming over to Europe and slagging off Europe at the Munich Security Conference and saying, you guys don't have freedom of speech, blah, 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 blah. Slagging off Europe, and then having Elon Musk big up AfD and all the right-wing populists, anti-EU movements in Europe. You have Trump slagging off quite often, like we just heard him, like Europe needs to get rid of its wind farms and its solar panels. Like, you would never have European leaders going over to America and slagging off parts of America and saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing this. God, America sucks in this way. But Trump feels he can do that to his allies, because he doesn't see them as allies, because he doesn't really understand alliances. He did briefly when he went over to the NATO summit and understood how alliances do work and should work. But he seems to have forgotten that now, and it's all about like genuflecting to the altar of hydrocarbons and fossil fuels and grifting and slagging off allies, to the point where China says, thank you very much, we're just going to sit and eat popcorn. And you get these analysts going, you know, what's going on? He's making the world a very, he's making his allies, he's isolating himself from his allies. And the world is now a very unfriendly place to the United States. And that is Trump's doing. To be sure, China is not about to supplant the United States as a new global hegemon, says the Washington Post. Many Asian countries are not keen on embracing a Pax Sinica, so that's kind of peace with China. After decades of Pax Americana, Europe, for all its new friction with the Trump administration, isn't about to pivot toward Beijing. Analysts expect Chinese EU talks at a summit this week to be cagey and cautious, but on at least one key front, green technology. So this ties to what I've just been showing you and speaking to you about, and we're going to also return to this. Trump has handed China a huge advantage in scrapping Biden administration funding for renewables and doubling down on fossil fuels. China is speeding down an open lane to become the leader in steering the world's energy transition. It is, as economic historian Adam Tooze said in a recent podcast, quote, the biggest laboratory of organized modernization that has ever been or ever will be. You can slag off China for still relying to a large extent on coal-fired power stations and opening new ones of them. But at the same time, they are absolutely funding the crap out of wind and solar. Obama was right back in whenever he said it, when he said the US should become the leader in green tech. And it isn't so much about environmentalism. And that's the problem Republicans have of this kind of anti-environmentalism bent. And I've had arguments with people on my threads who come up with really shite data points about like electric vehicles and this and that, and saying, well, they produce more particulates and this and that. And that. It's like, go and look at the actual data. Here's an article from the RAC, which is a driving lobbying group in the UK that puts all of those arguments, throws them in the bin. Like, the data is there. But this isn't about environmentalism. This is about future-proofing your economy. And if you don't get on the right side of history, you will lose. And sadly enough, the fossil fuel industry still has that much power in the United States that they maintain getting subsidized by successive governments. And while the Biden administration tried to change that and tried to rebalance that and put some investment in green tech for the future, for the sustainable future, but also for backing what is going to be demanded in the future, the US needs to be at the forefront. If you are an American, you would want the US being at the forefront of whatever the biggest tech is in the future. And in terms of energy, that's going to be renewables. It just is. Get over it. Stop thinking in terms of environmentalism and that being too woke, and think in terms of what's the future and are we going to back the right horse? This is an economic argument. And if you don't realize that, feck off, right? And it pees me off because some people are so anti-green that they think it's so woke that they don't understand that this is about economics first and foremost. And China has realized that, and they have invested the crap out of it, and the US has lost. They've lost that race. And they've lost it because the big beautiful bill not only takes away EV mandates, not only takes away grants for renewables, but then taxes renewables. The US is on the wrong side of history. Trump is on the wrong side of history. So China is speeding down an open lane to become the leader in steering the world's energy transition. Tooze argued that Americans have dropped the ball here and the consequences will be vast. Quote, this is the material dethroning of the West as a central driver of world history, he said. This is really what the provincialization of the West really looks like. I honestly, so well put there. And I just want to return to this in a little while, I think, when I look at some other ideas here. Now, I've already been going for an hour. I've got quite a lot of tabs to look at with regard to kind of US stuff. But in the meantime, let's just go to you guys, because you guys have been super basically been super what's the word, patient. MS brain, I'm struggling. Thank you, Michael Vuchart, for your ATP Geopolitics memberships. Really appreciate them, mate. Thank you for being such a great supporter. Goose Springsteens, JP, I'm sadly late to the stream. Wouldn't a good way to deduce a potential paid capture of these streamers be their recent coverage of the Epstein situation and Trump's involvement? It's fascinating when you see what the streamers do. Like, this is a really good point, Goose, by the way. And okay, let's talk about this a little bit. Streamers are not about ideology when you see them flip-flop all over the place when it comes to Epstein, right? For me, like, as a moral human being, whether I sit on the left or not, my morality dictates that those files should be published and the people who are in them should be outed and justice should be done. And I don't give a damn if that includes Bill Clinton or not. If it's people on the left and people on the right, so be it. Morality and the law need to take precedence here. What you see from the influencers is like these files need to be exposed. They need to be published. They need to be published. They spend years doing that. And when Trump says, no, they don't, then they go, oh, yeah, actually, no, maybe they shouldn't because of like this. And then when Trump says, okay, we're going to do this bit, then they go, yeah, that's really good. And if you see someone changing their mind just on what one person says or an administration says, it's got nothing to do with ideology, but all to do with, or the ideology is cult of personality. The ideology is maintaining power for the Republicans or for the MAGA. That's the ideology. It has nothing to do with political or moral content. So if influencers switch around like that, there's something else going on, and they're invariably grifters. Worth noting, says Goose again, like other forms of media, political streamers on both sides are incentivized and paid in a sense by access to politicians on their side, which they can monetize even if not paid in cash. Yes, and that's why I didn't go into the details there, but actually they may not be paid directly. They may be paid indirectly as well by kind of non-state actors, or they may be grifting on account of or making an earning, I guess. But I call it grifting when you are being disingenuous about that, when you're lying to your audience. This kind of goes back to what Elliot Higgins talked about, and I should have that slide just constantly to be able to show you. When he talks about true believers in the middle being manipulated by these three elements. One is state actors, one are non-state actors, and the other's kind of like influencers and grifters. And there is a kind of overlap between all of these elements, but when they don't truly believe it, they are not true believers, they are grifters. Like, for me, what I tell you, and you could just disbelieve me, right? I'm just asserting this, and you could say to me, look, JP, you're just as much a grifter as these people. You're an influencer, and you get this is my job. Literally, my income is entirely now because, as you know, I got ill with multiple sclerosis, had to give up my job, had to consider how to work from home, was working from home, was doing YouTube on the side as just like as my obsession. Then I got obsessed with the war in Ukraine, and then I started doing videos on that. And then that became bigger and bigger and bigger as there were people who weirdly wanted to listen to me. So that then eventually became my job, and I gave up the other work I was doing from home. Now, you can accuse me of being a grifter, but like, this is my job, and I see myself as a news aggregator, right? And I give you some analysis as well. But hopefully what I don't do to you, like I'm asserting, but you can't know what's in my head, but I am going to tell you that I don't lie to you in order to make money, right? I do not do that. It is not, I would be unable to do that. I couldn't sleep at night if I did that. Now, you don't know whether that's true or not. I could just be asserting this, but I'm telling you as truthfully as I possibly can that I don't do that, right? And I wouldn't do that. But what blows my mind is that there are so many people who do that. And I'm pretty sure that when you see Benny Johnson and Eric Doherty there say, look at these amazing crowds, and they're ecstatic welcoming him 47. He's now respected again. They don't believe that. That is propaganda. And you wouldn't get me saying that. You wouldn't get me bastardizing reality to make a quick dime. Just believe me, I wouldn't do it. And that depresses me that there are so many people out there that do that. Goose then says, my thoughts on the visit is that it's hopefully a positive thing for the UK, Europe, and Ukraine. Yeah, like I'm not necessarily, I'm against the private aspect of his visit, right? You go and do that when you're not president, mate. You go and play golf on and you open your own golf course when you're not president. But at the moment, that I think there's the emoluments clause that's been done. I think you are grifting on the back of your position. And you should have divested all interests before becoming president. You haven't done that, and therefore there are conflicts of interest here. And this is one big conflict of interest. So there might be some positives that do come out of this meeting with Starmer and Ursula von der Leyen, etc., etc. I don't deny that at all. And I hope that does happen. Starmer and von der Leyen clearly see the opportunity, and pragmatically, that's worth paying for. I don't necessarily disagree with that point, Goose. I just think that he does all those other things. I think the jet engine helicopter interview logic is it signifies dynamism because it implies you're going places and doing things. Interesting. Hadn't thought of that. Yeah. Yeah, it won't be coming from Trump. It'll be coming from one of his advisors. But yeah, I wonder. Goose, don't hit me, JP. But Ari, green energy, I'm going to come over there, Goose, and hit you. No, I won't. Green energy, I think you're being a bit uncharitable, as storage on nationally significant level with current tech is not viable in the UK. That's why we need gas for baseload. I don't deny we do need other things. It's about the mix. But the fact that you would have news readers or Thiessen there saying that you're relying on solar and wind. No, we're not relying on solar and wind. You want it in a mix. I think we need nuclear as our base, and then you have renewables. Hydro, I think, is really important, and it's far more reliable and consistent, and a load of mix. I'm really interested in stuff like wind in wave and tidal as well, as small scale, adding to the because again that's reliable and sustainable. That adds to the mix. So yeah, all of this should go into the mix, but don't straw man the position. Not saying that you are doing it. So Michael Vushar says, and I knew you would, Michael. I knew you would say this. This is poor sinology. So the idea is that there's a poor understanding of what China is doing, and I presume he's referring to me, but really the Washington Post. On the environmental side, China is good at copying, and that is it. Deng Xiang covered this point that without Western innovation, China would not develop their own green tech. True, undoubtedly true, but they are now, I think, beyond that and are perfectly able to innovate. They have, and this, they have benefited from going to Western universities and learning stuff. And they are at a position now where they can innovate. You look at, and yeah, you can say that at heart they start by copying, and you can look at that with, say, electric vehicles, where they have taken the electric vehicle market by storm by initially producing pretty poor stuff, but then realizing they can produce much better quality than, say, Tesla at a much cheaper price than Tesla, and then completely outcompete Tesla. And they are. I was in a BYD taxi in Dublin when I went to Dublin, and I spoke to the taxi driver about this, and he was like, "This is an absolutely incredible car. This vehicle is incredible," and he just couldn't be he couldn't fawn any more over the car than he did. And he's like, it does absolutely what, and it was a really comfortable. It was a really nice drive for me as a passenger, and you can get that for cheaper than Tesla, and you're paying peanuts for the power and so on and so forth. And what China have done is that they have, and I speak to my mate about this who imports these cars and stuff. He says you should see some of the, is it Jesu or something, whatever, like some of these cars are like Range Rover quality at like a fraction of the price. So you can say they're copying the idea over there, but actually they are now innovating battery technology to a point where they are massively out competing in tech. They just are. Like the 5-minute charge now is a thing. Charging your batteries in 5 minutes is a tech innovation where China is ahead of the rest of the world. And so, yeah, it may be that historically that was where they came from, but I would suggest that now China are they've turned up at the party. Mitch Mazarel, but thank you, Michael. Don't want to steer too far, of course, but I'm curious to see what our multipolar friend Grok has to say about Trump mentioning Trump's mentions in the Epstein document trove, given Musk's recent comments. I think that's worth doing, and I'm sure many people have done that. Grok is pretty good, actually, often, but not all the time. I saw Grok get something completely and utterly wrong when it was talking about a picture of someone, and it didn't have enough data, and it just thought someone was someone else completely, and then denied what was. Someone asked for a fact check, and it said, no, this is untrue, and actually it was true, and Grok had just got it completely wrong. So, always be careful. But Grok has also been really good at fact checking loads of stuff where people would say, and is this true, Grok? Which is, in case you don't know, Grok is the Twitter or XAI model that is employed on Twitter, on X, and you can ask it to fact check certain things, and Grok will reply to you. And I love to see so many people seeing something you think, that can't be true. I'm going to get that fact check and say, Grok, is this true? And Grok says, yes, it absolutely is, and provides all the data. And you're like, yeah, there you go. Good. But yeah, worth seeing what Grok has to say about Epstein. We're going to come to Epstein in a bit. I know I've been talking for too long. Mitch, again, thanks, dude. Having spoken to an oil company exec about the transition to green, he told me that the biggest issue, in his view, was load shedding and the existing grid. Hydrocarbons' power on demand capability will keep it around a while. And I absolutely agree with you, which is why I always talk about nuclear. Some people are saying in Germany, the big mistake of Germany was getting rid of nuclear, probably under the Green politician. They've been in Green coalition for some time. And I don't know if that's why they got rid of nuclear power, not nukes. And now they're coming to regret it, because as they are eschewing the hydrocarbons from Russia, they don't have that base load and what's going on there. So yeah, I think you definitely do need base load outside of renewables, of course. Right. Okay. Let's go on to some people talking about this. Grok is a good source in a very select situations. It's being used and referenced way too broadly, possibly. And Little Whiskey Shop here, thanks One Grail, say UK has no oil or coal-fired power stations. Gas currently provides rapid response. So yeah, we've moved more to gas, which is, I think, better than coal and oil, but still has its issues. Okay, last one before I get back to what I was saying. Goose Springsteen, thank you very much, mate. Does the West buying Chinese cars, being reliant on China, despite human rights concerns, give you sympathy for people in past centuries who indirectly benefited from slave labor, e.g. sugar and cotton? You always like to throw in a bit of philosophical thought here, Goose. And this comes down to consequentialist thinking or not, whether you're a strict utilitarian, which is, a means to an end. And you could talk about like some of the discoveries that were made as a result of horrific things that happened in the concentration camps, and all the Mengels and doing horrific things in German concentration camps, but then having benefits to society that came out of that through like whatever it is that was discovered. It's the same kind of thinking. Yeah, I would rather we arrived at beneficial outcomes without having to abuse human rights. And what we need to do is striving to have a world where human rights abuses are not normalized. And actually but this goes back to that Washington Post article that was talking about this new world view that China is trying to bring about is one that doesn't rely on democracy and human rights, whereas we should be in the West fighting for those things. So I think that whatever we do, we need to be definitely fighting for what is good and right in the world, rather than saying, well, it'll be cheaper if we do this, if we just had slave labor and kids working down the mines. Well, yeah, no, we can't have that. And if China does that, we need to put pressure on China. But the problem is, if the US, so I think the EU is pretty good at trying to uphold human rights around the world through trade deals and whatnot. or at least they've traditionally been, the US is going to go down a transactional route, then we've already seen if they're going to do trade deals with Myanmar and lift sanctions on them, then it's clear that actually a Trumpian worldview is much more aligned to a Chinese worldview than otherwise would have been. And that is deeply, deeply worrying. I think a Trump administration is far less likely to be wanting to do anything morally, and they'll just be wanting to make as much money as possible, as cheaply as possible. And that's worrying. Right, I've spoken way too long. I'm going to have to really rush through these guys. And I definitely need a drink. And I don't have one. And that was, some pretty shoddy thinking on my part. Right, absolute comment. So I did a video the other night on the trade deals and the insane stuff coming out from the US in terms of what's going on with the trade deals and also some of the numbers. Trump saying that he's going to reduce prescription drug costs by not 30% or 60%, but 500, 600, 1,000%, 1,500% without realizing that you can't reduce drug costs by 1,500%. You can only reduce them by 100% and then they're free. And anything above that means you are paying people to take drugs. So if he's literally telling people that the US administration is going to reduce drug prices by 1,500%, he's an absolute idiot. I mean, Trump is an idiot and he's mathematically thick as two short planks. But that's a kind of thing that's been normalized at the top of the agenda, at the top of the in the White House now. It blows my mind. Spencer Hakimian says, absolute comedy that Japan has come out and denied every single part of the True Social trade deal. So I said the other night that, Trump announced his trade deal on True Social and Japan has denied every part of the trade deal. He's saying, look at this wonderful trade deal we've done. But as Hakimian said, it's just a complete circus. I don't know if this is a Financial Times reference here. But anyway, Japanese officials, quote, Japanese officials said there was no written agreement with Washington, no legally binding one would be drawn up after Trump administration officials claimed Tokyo would back investments in the US from the American taxpayers and would reap 9/10 of the profits. So he's talking about $550 billion coming from Japan, and the US would get 90% of that, and Japan would get 10% of that. And it's just like people like Japanese like, no, that's not what we agreed to. And then there was the British trade deal as well, which isn't what America's claiming it is. And then there's a Philippines one. So Japanese officials said there was no written agreement with Washington and no legally binding one would be drawn up. And surprise, surprise, they deny giving Trump $550 billion to arbitrarily spend however he wants. Justin Wolf, as the Economist, then says the British trade deal wasn't what they said it was either. The Vietnamese won't confirm Trump's announcement, and the Japanese say they're not signing a binding agreement. The White House has released a text of 0 deals, and maybe it's all just social media posts all the way down. So they have announced they're supposed to have done 90 deals in 90 days, and they've announced a bunch of deals that when they announced them, the countries have come out and denied that those deals have actually taken place in the way that they're claiming. And Justin Wolf is saying it's just Truth Social posts all the way down, turtles all the way down, turtle on a turtle on a turtle, True Social on a True Social on a True Social post. Where is the actual trade deal? Where's the text? They won't release the text of the trade deals because they either don't exist or they're complete BS. That is a problem. Now, PBS has reported that the American automaker General Motors lost $1.1 billion in earnings due to Trump's tariff policies. Actually, I think they said partly or largely due. It wasn't wholly due to the tariff policies. Stellantis, a multinational company that employs tens of thousands of Americans, also lost earnings due. Oh, no, it was Stellantis that said it. It was in part. Sorry, it was Stellantis that said in part due to tariffs. So that is correct representation. $1.1 billion dent to earnings from General Motors. And of course, as I explained the other night, they've got like 50% tariffs on like steel and aluminium and copper and this and that, 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, which means to manufacture their own vehicles, General Motors has to pay more. Then they've agreed this, was it 19% trade deal, a tariff deal with Japan. So Toyota, when they announced this deal with Japan that you think is really bad and would make Japanese vehicles more expensive because there's a 19% tariff on them, Toyota's share price went up 8% or something like that because the trade deal with Japan still makes it cheaper to import and charge tariffs on a Japanese car than to make American cars, where they're having to import steel and aluminium and copper to make them. Because you've got higher tariffs on the stuff that you're making your American cars out of. So someone was saying that it is, and sorry for repeating myself, but not all of you would have watched this the other night. People are saying that it would be cheaper for General Motors to buy Japanese Toyota cars and relabel them as General Motors cars than to build their own cars and try and compete with Toyota. That's how insane this trade war and tariff policy is for the United States. Trump is being convinced by idiots like Peter Navarro and others around him. And Scott Bessant, I don't really know what he believes, but he's towing the party line. Howard Lutnick is just an absolute douchebag. And they're having these trade wars while then claiming that, look at all this money that we've raised. You've taxed either the importer, the distributor, the manufacturer, or the seller, or the consumer. But you've not taxed Japan or China. You've taxed any one of these elements to different degrees. That's where that money's coming from. So if you're shouting about how wonderful it is you've raised all these tariff revenues, you have done that through taxing American people and economic financial concerns. It's insane. Okay. I'm not going to go into details of this actually, but this was an extraordinary bit of footage here where Trump is next to Jerome Powell here, who is the Fed chair that he wants to sack, right? He wants to fire him. And they're going around the Fed here and looking at all these new buildings. And then Trump comes out with a load of stuff that was a misrepresentation of the money spent. And Jerome Powell then fact checks him live. And it was really, really uncomfortable. I mean, you can argue about how they were looking at the different data and stuff. But anyway, Trump said it looks like it's about $3.1 billion. It went up a little bit. The 2.7 billion is now 3.1. Powell said, I'm not aware of that. Trump said it just came out. Powell said this came from us. And Trump said, yes, you're including the Martin renovation. You just added in a third building. Trump said it's a building that's being built. Powell said, no, it was built 5 years ago. So he's literally fact checking him live on TV, and it was highly controversial. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that one in there. We're just going to go through a whole bunch of different things and try and sew some disparate threads together to essentially paint a bit of a picture of chaos here. We've got Kristi Noem, who's the Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security. She's in charge of FEMA. FEMA have been having to react to floods and whatnot. So, for example, if we look at this, Trump denies Maryland's request for FEMA aid, so they respond to emergencies. But it looks like not only are they trying to get rid of FEMA or cut the funding to it, but they're also politicizing its use and giving FEMA support to Republican states and not to Democrat states. So Trump has denied Maryland's request for FEMA after devastating floods, but he did approve aid for West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, and Michigan. Anyone want to guess what is different about Maryland? I know that not all of those are over Republican states, but there is this argument that's being politicized. And then we go to Kristi Noem, who has okay, so this is what Pesach Latin says as a source. You can't make this up. The head of FEMA's elite urban search and rescue team, one of the most decorated firefighters in American history, just slammed the door on his way out. Why? So he's quit. Because his crews sat parked like forgotten Uber drivers during the catastrophic Texas flooding for over a week. Why the delay? Because the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, Kristi, I killed my dog, and also accountability Noem, put in a policy that no FEMA deployment costing over $100,000 could move without her personal sign-off. And guess what? She wasn't answering her email. Imagine, so she basically didn't sign off on help going to Texas. There was claims that people weren't answering the phone, that FEMA only answered, what was it, 15.2% of phone calls, 15.7%. And she was not answering her emails. Imagine people literally drowning while the woman in charge is too busy doing what? Practicing her VP nod face in the mirror. This isn't just red tape. It's red tape tied into a noose. Ken Pangurek had enough, so he quit. And he's not alone. Morale at FEMA is circling the drain faster than floodwater in Houston. And we now live in a country where life-saving professionals have to wait for political theater to end before they can save lives. How many people died in Texas because of this? Welcome to the new American Disaster Protocol. So not looking good there. We've got health, Human and Health Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr., master conspiracy theorist, apparently he's now set to remove all 16 members of a cancer screening and HIV medication task force because he believes that they're too woke. So as someone says here, can a single Trump supporter explain how catching cancer early is woke? Then you've got this. This is a fascinating thing that's happening in the information spaces. So you've got Candace Owens. Candace Owens is she's a black woman and an influencer, a Republican influencer. Why is it notable that she's black? It's notable because she's actually what is it? I often get this wrong. It's not Uncle Tom, is it? It's no, it is Uncle Tom. It's the idea that you get some kind of black people in America who end up doing the bidding of white people and propagating a narrative that is actually problematic for them and their own sort of communities. And Candace Owens is often seen as one of these people who spouts oftentimes kind of pro-white propaganda as a black right-wing influencer. And she has, as a result, become incredibly popular. So white Republicans love her for being a black person saying things that are really right-wing, etc., etc. Now, what's interesting about her recently is she has just turned on Donald Trump for, I think, over the Epstein stuff particularly. And it's actually before that. And she was saying, no, I'm embarrassed. I think it might have been to do, I don't know if it's to do with ICE. I don't think it was. Whatever it was, she's kind of turned on Trump. But one of the things that she's most noted for at the moment is for continuing this conspiracy theory that Emmanuel Macron's wife is a trans man, right? And this has been kicking around the kind of QAnon information spaces for some time. Now, Emmanuel Macron is suing Candace Owens. So the president of France is now suing Candace Owens. Now, this person says here that that's the sound of Candace Owens cacking her pants. Actually, not quite so much. She has doubled down and is saying, I'll see you in court. And she said, like, Emmanuel Macron's wife, or are they married? Anyway, partner or wife was a man when he was born and will be a man when he dies, or something like that, and is going to town on this. She's not giving up. But then, here we have Robert Barnes saying it's apparent the people defending Candace Owens and thinking she will easily win the libel suit against Emmanuel Macron have not read the entire complaint. Owens told some of the dumbest, obvious lies one can tell. She has 0% chance of winning in court. And as Ron Filikowski says, that was Robert Barnes, who is Alex Jones's attorney. Alex Jones is your conspiracy theorist. Sandy Hook was a false flag operation, and there were crisis actors. Sandy Hook, which was an elementary school where a shooter went in and killed all these kids. It's horrific. He claimed it didn't happen. It was a conspiracy theory. Then the parents of the children, these parents who had lost their children, took him to court and said, what are you talking about? We've lost our kids. What do you mean we're crisis actors? He lost that court case, obviously. He then lost InfoWars, who still seems to be working under InfoWars. Anyway, he's now bankrupt, but he's a conspiracy theorist. His attorney, who's obviously defending him in defending conspiracy theories, is saying Candace Owens doesn't have a leg to stand on here. And that's a problem. So then Elliot Higgins from Bellingcat, the Macrons and Candace Owens lawsuit marks a new phase in the battle against conspiracy theories. This is in The Guardian. Now, I've said this before. When you had the conspiracy theory of the election in 2020 being fake, and that really Donald Trump won it, this is what Trump does. The only way of putting Trump and people who spread these conspiracy theories in their place is to take them to court. This is what Dominion did. Dominion and Smartmatic, but particularly Dominion, settled out of court in the end to the tune of $788 million, where Fox News had to pay them that. That's what you've got to do. I'm convinced that the only way to put these conspiracy theories to bed is to sue the crap out of the people that are spreading them. That's where we're at. So Emmanuel Macron, as a French president, needs to sue the crap out of Candace Owens, and I hope he does. Now, talking of court cases, the Murdochs, Rupert Murdoch and his empire, have decided to take him out. We're going to get onto the Wall Street Journal and Epstein for a little bit. So they appear to be backing the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal has now had 2 scoops against Trump. And of course, if Trump really wants to take News Corp to court, then everything comes out in the wash, doesn't it? And he doesn't actually want to take News Corp to court because they would have to then publish all the Epstein files. So the Murdochs have decided to take him out, says Jeff Timmer here. They've long had all the sort of dirt on Trump's criminality and corruption. They're going to empty their munitions stockpiles. This is going to be scorched earth. I don't know. It's interesting to see what it will be. But you can imagine a situation where the Wall Street Journal keeps dropping these truth bombs. Don't think for a second that the Wall Street Journal is done dropping Epstein bombs on Trump. They're just getting started, says Mike Madrid there. But sadly enough, you've got blocking still of the Epstein files. So breaking Senate Judiciary Republicans have just blocked an amendment. This is the 24th to force the release of the Epstein files. I talked about this the other night. You had Mark Mullen coming out and defending this call, saying that we're providing cover for Trump. So they literally admitted that not releasing the Epstein files is cover for Trump. Literally said it in those words. Chris Murphy, a senator from Connecticut, says the Republican Party exists right now for the single, sole purpose of protecting the rich and corrupt. That's how some people are seeing this. This could be a very dangerous hill for the Trump administration to die on. But of course, as we're going to see, he might well be doing some very clever things with the Ghislaine Maxwell. Major breaking news, the Epstein birthday book that contains that Donald Trump letter that he sent, which was the first Wall Street Journal scoop, contain that letter to Jeffrey Epstein, is not in the possession of the DOJ. In other words, it's because it's in the Epstein estate, it can be subpoenaed. People can get hold of that book and prove whether Trump actually wrote that or not. This means that members of Congress can subpoena to see it, and this is a nightmare for Donald Trump. So that's something to watch out for. Now, the DOJ has been meeting. 2 days worth of meetings now have taken place between Todd Blanche, and this is not the DOJ, this is Trump's personal lawyer on behalf of the DOJ, has met with Ghislaine Maxwell in prison, not in front of Congress, not where anyone else can see what's being said, but behind bars, pretty much, in prison. Todd Blanche, the personal attorney of Donald Trump. You know 100% that they are going to do a deal with Ghislaine Maxwell, so she releases all the dirt on Democrats, but not Republicans, that she exonerates Trump and she gets a pardon. It will happen. Ron Filikowski says, I'm going to go way out on a limb here and predict 3 things after this takes place. 1, DOJ will announce Maxwell completely exonerated Trump. 2, they will lie and announce they made no deals or promises to her. And 3, the deal they made with her will happen at the end of Trump's term. That's a pretty good prediction. Now, let's listen to this. So this is now Donald Trump answering the question.
Would you consider a pardon or a commutation for Ghislaine Maxwell?
Would you consider a pardon or a commutation for Ghislaine Maxwell?
It's something I haven't thought about. It's really something. I'm allowed to do it, but it's something I have not thought about.
I've not thought about it. I'm allowed to do it. I can do it. But honestly, I've not thought about that one. Oh, that's a good. Not thought of that.
Why has the dollar?
I'm just saying.
Something I have not thought about.
But you wouldn't rule it out.
So he didn't answer whether he wouldn't rule it out or not. He just says, I haven't thought about it. Now, remember, I've already played this to you, but this is where your Newsmax host says that Ghislaine Maxwell might be the victim.
And she's also been subpoenaed by the Oversight Committee. I think this is great. I do have a feeling that she just might be a victim. She just might be. There was a rush to judgment. There was a lot of chaos there for a while. All right. Granted, she hung out with Jeffrey Epstein. And I know that's apparently not good.
Apparently not good. It's apparently not good to hang out with Jeffrey Epstein.
But she's in jail for how long now? 20 years. A 20-year sentence. Let's find out what.
She might just be the victim. So upside down world that we live in, left is right, right is left, up is down, down is up. Okay. Now, Tim Burchett, who's a MAGA Republican lawmaker.
She's a liar. No, she is a liar, and she's a dirtbag. And
so then why subpoena her if you can't trust her?
Well, because the one thing we got holding over her head is if we find out she lies, she goes back to her original sentence, and that's looking at lifetime. And if she's looking at maybe parlaying this into reducing her sentence, then we could have some leverage there.
Government.
So leverage on reducing her sentence. There you got. Tim Burchett has just told you that they've got leverage in reducing her sentence. Tim Burchett admits that the House Republicans may agree to ask the DOJ to reduce the sentence of sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell in exchange for her testimony, if they like what she has to say. This is what is happening. They're telling you themselves. And let's listen to Representative Jimenez here, see what he has to say.
Look, no, I haven't heard from my constituents. Again, this is much more important to a few people than it is to the vast majority of Americans. Americans are I think, are over the Epstein case. They have been over it for a long time. It keeps being brought up, and that's why I think this. Hey, man, just release the things, and this thing will go away, and put it in. It's already been resolved in court. The man was found guilty. He did some heinous things.
So I'm not going to play the rest of that, but he goes on to then slag off Obama and say that things should happen about Obama, right? This distraction thing that we're seeing with Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump. Now, this is a really good point here. Representative Jimenez says Americans don't care about girls raped by Epstein because it happened 8 years ago. Oh, it's been gone. We're over it now. But then immediately makes a case for focusing on Obama's involvement in the 2016 election. So, yeah, something happened 9 years ago. Yeah, let's get the hell out of that bad boy. Yeah, because it's useful for Obama to go down. But so I think we're a little bit over Epstein now. I mean, it's 8, 10, 20 years ago. You know, whatever. Whatevs. I mean, it's only sexual abuse. I mean, whatevs. Nah, don't care. And the American people don't care. Apart from, it appears that they do. Quite a lot of people do care. Now, to slightly change tack here, although not really, actually, it's about Epstein. It's not changing tack. But this is an NBC News exclusive here. A MAGA bot network on X, on Twitter, is divided over the Trump-Epstein backlash. Researchers have found hundreds of fake X accounts that support the Trump administration. But the issue is, honestly, so much work needs to be done on social media sites to close down bots and trolls. It needs to happen. Elon Musk is absolutely derelict. There's a dereliction of duty there. And I think he should be. I think he should be fined. I think there should be regulation against Twitter and bots and trolls who are used by state actors nefariously to disinform and as information warfare against us. That should be stopped. What's interesting here is you've got bots and trolls that don't quite know what to do. That they are divided over the Trump-Epstein backlash, because on the one hand, this is perfect divisive territory, right? Let's cause chaos here. Let's get the Epstein files out. But on the other hand, if it brings about the downfall of Trump, then that's actually not quite what, say, Russian trolls want. They want Trump there because Trump is doing the bidding of Russia. So there's a division over what the trolls are kind of wanting and thinking. So yeah, absolutely fascinating. Anyway, I do get really frustrated at bots and trolls there. Just a couple of memes I'm going to go through. We're coming quickly to the end here. Speaks volumes, doesn't it? Let's see what kind of deal Ghislaine Maxwell makes with the rapist felons, lawyers, and administration. She deserves to rot in prison, and so does he, says this particular source. But I love this. You got Hillary Clinton, nasty woman. Elizabeth Warren, nasty woman. Kamala Harris, nasty woman. Ghislaine Maxwell, I wish her well. Now, this is not a joke. He literally has called all those people horrific things. But when he was interviewed by Axios, remember it was, what's his name? Jonathan, the Australian journalist, interviewed him one-on-one. And he famously said, I wish her well. And the journalist, like, you wish her well? I mean, she's in prison for like these heinous crimes, right? And you wish her well? He's like, yeah, I would always wish people well in prison and blah. So the words that he said about Ghislaine Maxwell have been far, far more positive than the words of colleagues in Congress. That meme is really astute. Honestly, don't just dismiss stuff like that. Where are your morals when you say nicer things about sexual predators, about sex traffickers of minors, than you do about politicians in your own country? Just incredible. And this is a meme. This is not apropos to anything. This is not really a meme. It's just a statement. But I love this. It's about the community notes as well. Community notes, remember, is the way that ex-users can correct people without moderators having to get involved. So it's kind of like an open source form of correction. And usually community notes will factually correct what people have claimed. But sometimes you get a bit of diamond activity like this. So Obama has a foundation, says this particular user. So a foundation being a charitable foundation. Obama has a foundation. Clinton has a foundation. Biden has a foundation. Bush has a foundation. So this isn't like partisan. Like Republicans and Democrats have foundations. Trump doesn't. Any questions? And the community notes is fantastic here because he doesn't have a Trump foundation at the moment. He doesn't have a charitable foundation. But the correction here from the community notes is Trump doesn't have a foundation because the Trump Foundation was dissolved by court order in 2018 due to multiple legal issues regarding fraud and the mishandling of funds. Trump was ordered to pay $2 million in restitution. Again, like, I'm going to go back to a meme here and say, this is astute and it tells you an awful lot. That tells you an awful lot. This kind of is not a joke. I mean, this is factual, but this tells you a lot. These former presidents have foundations to try and make the world a better place. Trump doesn't have one because he's not interested in charity, but he did have one, but it was, he used it fraudulently. He literally lost in court and had to pay out because his foundation was fraudulent. That's who the president of the United States is. That's all you need to know. He's going and playing golf in Scotland to grift and fricking line his pockets. I am close to ranting now because this man is a moral fecking black hole. He is not good for anyone but himself. And when he is good for someone else, it's by mistake. Or it's because primarily he's trying to be good for himself. The man is a moral vacuum of the highest order. Now, I was going to say stuff about ICE. I don't have time. I've been talking for too long. I will very quickly say this, actually. So I've said I won't, and then I will, because otherwise I'll have to save this for another video. I'm worried about what ICE is doing. They're disappearing people, and it is just as bad now as it was weeks and weeks ago. ICE disappears a US citizen without formally booking him for 10 hours just for filming them. So now they can just arrest you for filming them. If you don't think that this is authoritarianism, then you're missing something here. So it's all on camera. So many of these are. Man filming, told the border patrol agent he was short and it hurt his feelings. You threatening me, the agent yells back in response to wisecrack about his height. That's when the witness started recording the video on her phone. According to Gwen Velosa Media in Key West, Florida, Dan Mathers was observing the ICE raid from a safe distance with a very large row of hedges between them, not in any position to interfere with the arrest. He was then finally able to contact his family at 2 a.m. the next morning. So a guy was behind a hedge filming, and then, you know, they arrest him for that. So you can no longer film to make sure these people are doing the right things, it seems. And then you've got stuff like this happening. And I just want to say, like, although the British police aren't like perfect, right? I'm sure there are lots of issues we have with all departments and enforcement agencies and whatever. I'm not being anti-police. In fact, I'm being kind of pro the British police because I'm fairly sure this just wouldn't happen. This is a doctor, an Iranian doctor with a child in his in a car seat, a children's seat, being blurred out.
Thank you so much. You mind if I grab your ID from you? Go ahead and roll your window all the way down. Why? What's going on? Go ahead and roll your window all the way down.
So a lot of this has to do with reasonable cause. Like, do you have the rights of the? I think it's to do with, like, you know, you have to have reasonable cause to stop me, and you need to communicate that to me rather than stop, wind your window down. I need your ID. It's like, okay, why? You got to tell me why this is so. Like, it's easy to think the police have the right to do anything that they want and demand, but actually that's not the case. There are laws and procedures in place, and this is why due process is really, really important.
I have a baby in the car. That's okay. That's okay. Yeah. Just roll your window all the way down. Go ahead and roll your window down. You're in the window.
So then he's talking, and the little kid in the back is saying, "Police, police, it's the police," and he's talking to his kid, and then he's trying to calm the police down, and then they just smash his window. They basically just smash his window, and that's that.
Yeah, put your car here. Yeah.
Put the car over there.
Put the car over there. Yeah. Mommy's coming now. Yeah. Okay. Hell, hold on. I'm getting out. I'm getting out.
Well, you should have done it already.
I told you 3 times. I'm looking at your seatbelt. Step out of the car. You still understand. Step out of the car. Okay.
So this guy is really calm with it, and he's like, "What are you doing?" They break his window and they get him out of his car. Anyway, no process seems to be followed. And then it reminds me, I saw both of these videos within 10 minutes of each other. This isn't to do with ICE. This is a guy a black guy that they'd stopped. And they say because he didn't have his headlights on when it was raining, but he's like, it's not raining. And this is unbelievable, this video. This has become really controversial. And the police have come out and said, actually, you don't know the full context of this and blah, blah, blah. But what I can say is that this man is the calmest under immense pressure that I've ever seen a human be. And this wouldn't happen in the UK. And I worry that there's this growing authoritarianism that in the US where people seem to be given or have given themselves permission to act in ways that I think are pretty horrific. I've done it, haven't I? I've done it. I've missed it. I haven't been showing it to you. Here it is.
He walked up, opened my door so my window don't work, right? And then I said, so what I did wrong? He said, well, for one, your headlights are off under this weather. I'm like, there's multiple people headlights off, first of all. And then there's no rain.
It doesn't matter. You're still required to have headlights on.
Can you pull that law up?
Huh?
Can you pull that law up?
Yeah, when you step out of the car, I will.
Can you call your supervisor?
Huh?
Can you call your supervisor?
All right, go for it.
Exit the vehicle now. Exit the vehicle. Show me your hands.
Here.
I'm here. What is your reason, sir? What is your reason?
Step out now.
All right. No, don't.
Punch in the face again there.
Stop fighting.
Put your hands behind your back.
Put your hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
Okay, so, you know, I'm sure we can find lots of instances of police being terrible in lots of different countries, etc., etc. But they're just like, I've seen so many windows being broken in cars, but you know, the situation with ICE being given all this money and this perception of greater power, and this lack of due process, that it's almost like anything's possible now, and this slide towards authoritarianism is happening in front of us. And unless we get really angry about stuff like this, I say we, like I'm in the UK, it's not my country, but I do worry, because you know, you've got someone there, and okay, I don't know the context, but it does seem like he was stopped, and he was explaining very clearly that I was told that I didn't have my headlights on, but it's not raining, and then they just start smashing his window and punch him in the face and take him out of the car and then punch him in the face. It's like, and I swear that I'm sure in that same situation that would not have happened in the UK. I have confidence that our police just follow due process at least somewhat better than that. But I do worry, and I don't want to just be cherry picking random things that are going bad in the US and going, oh, look at this is all, look how terrible Trump, blah blah blah. But there is a pattern of ICE and other law enforcement agencies just turning the dial, I think, a little bit more, and it is truly worrying. And then and what I'm trying to do is sew some of these threads together for you, because then you have Trump saying this, and this is what you really should be worried about.
I'd like to say it, you know, a little controversial, but I couldn't care less. We have a lot of bad criminals that came into this country, and they came in stupidly. It was an unforced error. It was an incompetent president that allowed it to happen. It was an auto pen maybe that allowed it to happen, and it did happen. But we also have a lot of bad people that have been here for a long time. People that whack people over the head with a baseball bat from behind when they're not looking and kill them. People that knife you when you're walking down the street. They're not new to our country. They're old to our country. Many of them were born in our country. I think we ought to get them the hell out of here too. You want to know the truth. So maybe that'll be the next job that we'll work on together.
So there he's advocating, you know, getting bad people out of the United States. But then it's like, well, who do you define as bad and illegal and this and that? And does that eventually move to like political opponents? And by the way, that last incident, I'm not so much saying that is anything to do with race. I mean, there's a black policeman there as well, but it's about due process. Like, you don't break people's windows and punch them in the face, but when they're just sitting there calmly. Like, at the very least, like, you can kind of force the door open somehow and get them out of the vehicle. Like, even that's not going to be due process. But like smashing the window, punching them in the face, dragging them out of the car, punching them in the face again, when that man is incredibly calm, right? That is unjustified, and that's what I'm saying. It's about due process, and then like tying it together with, well, we can start thinking about getting our own people out of the country and into these foreign gulags, etc., etc. But yeah, anyway, it's a problem. Just finally on CBS and Paramount and doing the deal. I've explained this to you a number of times. I shouldn't have to explain it to you again, hopefully. But a bit more information here. So Skydance is now going to be, due to Brendan Carr, who's in, I'd said Burr the other day, it's Carr. Brendan Carr, who's in charge of the FCC, is the person that gives a permission for two massive entities to merge. And Paramount wanted to merge with Skydance. And in order to merge, it looks like in order to get Carr to say yes, they settled out of court with Trump, who frivolously sued them for a bunch of money. They gave him $16 million out of court, and then another maybe 25 to 35 million in PSAs, public service announcements, basically positive PR on CBS, worth to the tune of $35 million, maybe. That's what the South Park episode picked up on. And the last part of that, the most controversial part, where they had Trump going out into the desert, was their kind of fake PSA, saying, because in the South Park episode, South Park, the town, was sued by Trump, and then they agreed to a settlement, and as part of the settlement they had to give PSA. So basically it was a parallel of the CBS or the Paramount court case there, and that's where that controversial end bit, where you had Trump being naked in the desert and his pecker talking and so on and so forth, and the teeny weeny whatever. Okay. But this is someone saying, to be clear, Larry Ellison, a billionaire Trump donor who believed the 2020 election was stolen from Trump, used his own money to buy CBS and install his son as the boss. They'll then convert CBS into another right-wing propaganda mill like Fox News. It's not really subtle. Says Larry Ellison invests $6 billion in son David's Paramount takeover. The family office is funding the majority of the $8 billion merger with Skydance as Redbird Capital Partners, blah, blah, blah. So there's way more to this than meets the eye. And when you start hearing then that Colbert goes, and I did say it was a financial decision the other day, and I still think it was primarily a financial decision, there are other things at play too. And there's definitely this idea, I think, that Trump is trying to control the media. So then we come to Brendan Carr, the FCC chairman here, being asked about this, as Joe Walsh, who's a former Republican lawmaker, saying, do not normalize this. This is fascism. So what's fascism? What's he talking about?
Yeah, and so again, when Ana Gomez writes, you're imposing never before seen controls over newsroom decisions and editorial judgment in direct violation of the First Amendment, you say what?
I think it's time for a change, and the procedures that we put in place in this deal have lots of precedent. For instance, there's been ombudsmans put in place by the FCC before. We're putting a biased ombudsman in place here. We're addressing DEI. The prior FCC during the Biden years put pro-DEI commitments in different transactions. And so we're unwinding that type of approach. And we're frankly taking a trust but verify perspective here. I think this could go a long way to restoring America's trust in media. And again, the media itself, I think, has undermined itself over these last couple of years. When you look at the stuff that Colbert is doing, the idea that, a partisan carnival makes economic sense. These are business decisions at the end of the day. And again, I think it goes back to President Trump, because this facade of gatekeeper legitimacy that was conferred on these outlets is going away. And we're just seeing a lot of dominoes fall as a result of that.
So in other words, he doesn't answer the question and pretty much admits that you're imposing never been seen controls over newsroom decisions and editorial judgment in direct violation of the First Amendment. What do you say to that? So that was a question. And then he says, I think it's time for a change. So he doesn't disagree that that's what's going on, that they are putting never been seen before controls over newsroom decisions and editorial judgment. That is the road to authoritarianism, where you control the media. I've talked about this so often before with Hungary. This is Viktor Orban. That's his playbook. Trump loves some Orban. He thinks he's the greatest leader in Europe. He is following the Orban playbook. He absolutely is. And then here we have Brendan Carr again.
Broadcasters. We heard a little bit about what they're going to do different on 60 Minutes. Is there anything beyond that you could tell us about what they're going to do differently, fact-based? That's kind of a cultural shock to them. It's going to be.
Yeah, it might be news to some folks over there. One of the things they're going to have to do is put an ombudsman in place for 2 years. So basically a bias monitor that will report directly to the president. So that's something that's significant that we're going to see happening in broadcasters.
We heard a little bit about.
So they're going to put a bias monitor in, an overseer. Like you're not allowed to say stuff against the left. So we're going to put a bias monitor to make sure that you're unbiased, but it's okay to say things that are nice about Trump. It's just when you say things that are not nice about Trump. Okay, yeah, that's authoritarianism. And it's creeping, and it's happening in the way that the ICE are acting, and it's happening in the way that the administration is acting with media. And it's not cool. It's definitely not cool. Anyway, with that ending to the South Park episode, here we have Mrs. Betty Bowers, well worth following on Twitter. Trump is reported to want to sue over the South Park, saying he has a tiny penis. That would be funny for two reasons. One, the discovery, and two, truth is an absolute defense in defamation actions. In other words, he'll probably have to put his trousers down and show the evidence in a court of law. I just thought that's quite amusing. And finally, just the let's have a little bit of Lauren Boebert. Why not? Just the hypocrisy that we see. So the big beautiful bill that got passed and is going to be, I think, incredibly damaging to certainly to the welfare state in the US. She said, I voted yes back in May 22nd. I voted yes on President Trump's one big beautiful bill. And then yesterday, or whenever it was, We should be ashamed to even have a donation button for the US Treasury when we're paying people at darn near 50% every single year and still can't reduce the debt. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem, and a massive one. This is freaking hilarious. So just to give you the context, the US government today announced that you can help pay off the US debt. Literally, you and I can help pay off the US debt by PayPal and backs transfers and whatever. So you've got like a button or whatever on the government website where you can donate to the US debt. Now, a month ago, she said, or a couple of months, whatever it was, I voted yes on a big, beautiful bill. And what did the big, beautiful bill do? It raised the debt ceiling by $4.5 trillion and it's going to raise the debt by however many, somewhere between $3 and $5 trillion, they reckon. Right. So the one big, beautiful bill hammers the national debt. She then whinges about we've got a debt problem, a massive spending problem. And she's just said, yes, I voted for the big, beautiful bill that exacerbated that problem. I love that Twitter handle that just says, you said this previously and you said this now. Are you the same person? Because that is totally contradictory with that. Anyway, Lauren Boebert, who knew? Right, that's it. I've really spoken way too much. I need a very, very big drink of something. I better say thank you to all the people who have contributed and helped out, and there are many more to add to this. So thank you, guys. So thank you very much to Joe Hales, who's such a great supporter always. Thanks, mate. I really appreciate that. Very, very generous. Johnny Nebregard, thank you for some Norwegian love. Awesome. Mal, towards your trip to Scotland, get yourself a coffee after running around naked. No, I did qualify that. I'm not running around. I'm going to golf buggy around naked. I might get a Desert Cross 1000-3, maybe pick it up from somewhere geolocated in Ukraine and get myself a golf buggy there and go around the golf course naked. Thank you very much, Mel. Really appreciate that. Alpha Chad Games. JP, I'm watching this on a 90-minute delay, but I knew from experience alcohol is great for a sore throat. Great. Get the white port out. You'll regret it. Or else. Otherwise. I have just got a bottle of white port from Mark at the Little Whiskey Shop, who was in the live chat. He's probably not anymore. He's probably got better things to do now. But Mark, I might have to. I mean, I shouldn't because I'm not very well at all. But I think a little bit of white port will soothe my throat. Thank you for the advice, Alpha. I will blame you when I'm even worse for wear tomorrow. James Cowley, thank you for the ATP Geopolitics memberships. You are a legend. A ledge burger with extra relish. Thanks for all the great chat, guys. Yes, thank you to all the mods and people helping the chat go along. This is effed up. Don't vote for Raj or we're next. Yeah, don't get me started on that one. It will be a very long goodbye then. M. DeVilden, thank you, Margaret. China copycat. So what? Don't reward the MF. Reward the innovator. Fund education. Absolutely agree with all of that. Thank you very much for your support. Very kind. Wizard of Ooze. DJT is worse than a black hole. He really does suck. Yes, there is a lot of suckage, more than a black hole. And Rob, thank you for the beer fund. I hope you are well in Bristol. Say hello to your other half, as we have met. And there's a Little Whiskey Shop. Still here, JB, hoping you're doing as I am. Home alone with nothing to do. You keep going, as I am home alone with nothing. Sorry, I can't even read. That's how exhausted I am. Mark, thank you. Little Whiskey Shop. They sell Ukrainian wine. Had a nice bottle of red the other night. Thank you very much for that. Mark, I appreciate you. I was thinking, Mark, that we need to go to Ukraine and deliver some vehicles again. I have an idea for when might be a good idea. That is not in the middle of winter, because I seem to only ever go to Ukraine when it's in the middle of winter. So I'll hit you up on these socials, mate, and we'll talk about that. Get some vehicles back over there. It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for everyone for putting up with my rambling. And I know I went to loads of different places, one just about Ukraine, and I've got a whole tab group about the protests and the change of law that I haven't gone through because I knew I wouldn't have time. I need to rest my voice. Thank you for all you guys do in supporting the channel. And please remember, we are, of course, still doing the atpgeo.com/donate our, we are, just put it up at the bottom there. We are doing our campaign for Drone Lab and for Jigger's Paw. In fact, if I just show you one last thing before I go, and that will hopefully lead you to help out with the campaign. If you can, and you haven't already done so, here it is. We are at an awesome $11,372. If you can help out there, that really would be fantastic. Go and check out the live stream I did with Bogdan from Drone Labs. It's fascinating. If you want to learn about drones and loads of the tech involved, and all the interaction with the amazing audience over that was fantastic. You guys asked such amazing questions. Please go and check that out. Why can't you see that? Because I'm stupid. There you go. Please go to atpgeo.com/donate to check out helping out with that campaign, but also check out that live stream with Bogdan on the live tab on my channel, and that'll give you a good sense of what we're donating towards and how it will help the people of the 47th Brigade there. I'm going to go. Take care, everybody. Toodle pips. Big love. I'm still here. Am I still here? Bye.